Theresa started her career in some ways working as a journalist covering technology, and then was involved in founding the Real Story Group. Some of you may notice that the title of her presentation is The Damn Technology Cocktail, the Best Ingredients for 2013 and Beyond. And I think part of the reason I enjoy thinking about her title for this is that, in a way, Theresa is the sobriety checkpoint for the Always a delight to please help join me in welcoming Theresa.
Thank you. Good morning. Great to see you all. I haven't actually made it to this event for a couple years. I wasn't here last year, and of all the Henry Stewart events, this is the one I have unfortunately attended the least. So it is really wonderful to be here, to see many of you again that I haven't seen for a while, and also for those of you I haven't met, it's really nice to have you here. Thank you for coming. David gave you a bit of my background already. Essentially been involved in the IT industry in one way or another for about 18 years. And digital asset management has been my focus for about the last 6, and that's how I met David and many of you here in the room. So great to be here. Real Story Group is a firm that does technology research and advisory services. So we look at a lot of technologies across the landscape, and that's really how this theme of a technology cocktail came about. So allow me to walk you through a little tour of drinks. I know it's early, and sometimes I envision doing this presentation with actual bartenders kind of making drinks and handing out drinks, but not today. So I'm going to introduce you to 2 people that actually have been quite significant in my life. They're not related to me, they're not family, they're not children or anything like that. They're my bartenders. And they're important to me for a pretty particular reason, is that they inspired this theme of technology cocktails for me this year, and I'll tell you a little bit about them. This is Al and Sarah. When I am home, I live in Center City, Philadelphia, though I'm not there very much. And there's a bar that's about a 10-minute walk from my house called the Franklin Mortgage and Investment Company. Typical speakeasy, sort of under the building, down through a very kind of furtive staircase and into a basement. And they make absolutely fabulous drinks there, really wonderful drinks there. And I moved to Philadelphia a couple years ago, and I met Al and Sarah, and I started to really enjoy cocktails. Sometimes the word mixologist is used to describe these people, and it's the idea of someone who's very skilled in making cocktails, but generally these people prefer to be called bartenders. More common title. So I came to really fall in love with this cocktail, The Last Word. This is my favorite cocktail. Anyone ever had this one before? Very few hands going up. All right, not a lot of cocktail aficionados. I would think in LA we'd have a little bit more of this. So it's a very simple cocktail. It's 4 equal parts. Okay, it's gin, which is, I find that actually most of the drinks I like have a base of gin. Maraschino liqueur, green chartreuse, and lime juice. This is Colin. Colin's another bartender at the Franklin here, mixing this drink. And I like this drink for a lot of reasons. It's refreshing. It's great on a summer day. It's got citrus, so I feel like I'm getting my vitamin C without having to take a vitamin. It's all good. Now, the thing that I realized as I learned to love cocktails is that it's part art, part science to make a great cocktail. You have to think about, well, what's my base spirit? First of all, what is sort of the foundation for what I'm doing? Then you have to think about, what am I going to mix with that base spirit to actually make something that's tasty and delicious and works well together? It's all about finding a balance, okay? So you might have gin or bourbon or brandy. These are sort of typical base spirits. Then you're going to mix some kind of citrus juice with it very often, sometimes not. It's not that all cocktails have citrus, but many of them do. Then usually there's some kind of sweet element, and then there's something that adds a bit of complexity to it. So there's some very interesting spirits like chartreuse, which is a blend of different herbs that are made by these monks in the Alps, kind of like some of the technologies we use. You sort of wonder, where did that come from? There's only about 20 people who actually know how to make it. Kind of like the code in some digital asset management systems. And then we've got a lot of other potential ingredients that could be in a cocktail. So as I learned about cocktails, I realized just how much this is like the technology challenges we have today. We're not dealing with just one technology anymore. We actually have to think about how do we mix a bunch of technologies together to work properly and to really make sense and actually taste good and actually make us want to go to work every day, right? So what I learned from the bartenders is that balance And also understanding the exact role that each ingredient plays in the cocktail is extremely important for success. If you use a little too much of something, or you use something in a way that it wasn't intended, or that it's not designed for, you generally will have a bit of a disaster on your hands. It'll really taste kind of awful. And I think we run into the same problems in our technology world. I've noticed that bartenders use agile development methods too. Just like we do in software development. They get together and they sample each other's drinks and they sort of challenge each other, just like developers in a basement somewhere in some office where they're sort of trying to outcode each other. Bartenders often are trying to do the same thing. Who's going to invent the more interesting drink? Let's all taste each other's drinks and line it up and keep trying until we get it right. And they do user testing as well. One of the nice things about being a regular at this bar is sometimes I am given a preview drink where they say, tell us what you think of this, Theresa. Right? Just like a good software development process puts software in front of a user beforehand and says, tell us what you think of this. Does it work for you? Do you like it? Is it going to actually help you do your job? Is it going to help you be successful? The last part of this whole drink making process that reminded me of what we do every day is that they prepare for rollout. Okay? They build up some hype around the new menu. So this particular bar, they have a new menu every quarter. They invent new drinks, they roll it out, and they make a big deal about it. They let people know we're going to have a new menu. Then it gets people to come. It gets people excited about trying the new drinks, just as we all should when we roll out new technology. And even if there's a whole bunch of different ingredients in there, no one really needs to know. The whole purpose of it is to design just a great user experience. Present it with style in a way that makes people excited to drink it. So after I had this whole experience of learning about cocktails about a year and a half ago, and since then I've been quite an avid enjoyer of cocktails, I realized that what we're dealing with today in the digital asset management world is extremely similar, as I mentioned. We have digital asset management systems, and maybe some of you have had digital asset management systems for a long time, and you're realizing it can't sit on its own anymore, right? It can't just exist and not talk to other systems. It can't be part of a blend of more advanced and frankly, more complicated mixes of technology that are necessary for us today to achieve our goals. So thinking of a DAM system as sort of our base technology, since this is a digital asset management conference, and probably for most of you that's the technology you use the most. There's often things that get integrated with it that have to do with works in progress. Things that we are constantly trying to manage from a workflow perspective or from a creative perspective, things like Creative Suite, Final Cut, Avid Production, whatever it might be. You need to connect these things to your DAM in most cases. You also need to think about, how am I going to make this a unified suite user experience? What are the tools that I'm going to use to bring together not just my DAM users, but potentially information from other systems, functionality from other systems, and not necessarily have people realize they're dealing with a mix of stuff. Because that's what actually frustrates them. They just want to have the full, complete, wonderful blended experience at the end of the day so that they can do their jobs. And then finally, we have these herbal complexities. This is where you're dealing with perhaps very complicated data, your product data from somewhere else, social media platforms, rights management systems, your web content management system that is pushing and pulling from your DAM, taking things or using things from your DAM. And this creates a very complex technology cocktail that we all have to figure out how to mix in our organizations. And it's never the same from company to company. So don't think that there's one perfect cocktail. Just like there's not one perfect cocktail for everybody, there's also not a perfect technology mix that we all can just kind of pull out. The problem is we're all still drinking straight shots. We're all just sort of lining up the bourbon, and it's not a very pleasant experience in general, because we're keeping things in silos, and this is the way your typical organization tends to manage things. There's different technologies that are sitting in different systems, and there's a lot of redundancy. There's a lot of different pieces of content that, in fact, are the same thing that might be somewhere else. So you have documents that might be sitting in a document management system, such as SharePoint. I'm sure most of you have documents sitting in SharePoint or some other document management system. You might have a digital asset management system where you have your audio, video, images, brand assets, etc. You might have a web content management system that has a lot of duplicates of what's in your DAM system. You might also have a digital marketing tool of some kind that's doing email automation or social media monitoring and bringing data back in that should help you make decisions about how to better use your assets. But these systems are likely not communicating with one another. This is the big challenge. This year, the next few years, is making these things talk to each other. It's very, very fundamental, and it's very, very important for success as far as what we're all in the business of doing. The issue with these single source systems or these single content systems not speaking to each other is that people are pained. And I'm sure this is the case. I see a lot of noddings right now where you sort of think to myself, oh my gosh, I have to go to work tomorrow and I'm going to have to copy and paste this stuff from system to system all day because they're not communicating, they're not talking to each other. This is the situation we find ourselves in. So as you think about your own situation, as you think about your own organization, you think about your digital asset management system, you need to think of it over the course of these next few days, not just as a standalone system, but how can we take it beyond the straight shots? How can we connect to everything in our organization that's really relevant to do great brand engagement, to make great brand engagement happen, to make great media engagement happen, whatever business you're in, whether it's media or content or whether you're managing a brand. Think about all the information that needs to come together to make that really happen. I'm going to give you some examples of things that I've seen over the last year that have made that happen. One of the ways you can think about crafting this right technology cocktail is you need an Al. Al, here's the bartender again. Think about, are you that person? A lot of organizations don't actually have somebody thinking about this specifically. But you might be that person. That's likely why you're here, right? Because you're somebody who's thinking about brand assets, you're thinking about media, and you're thinking about how to better engage your customers or your content consumers, whoever it might be. You're thinking about how can I bring them in and really engage them. Maybe you're the person to think about what are the technologies I need to bring together? How do I create this cocktail in the right way? Or at least maybe you're the person to assemble the great minds in your company that can make this happen and make them collaborate, make them have the discussions, bring them to the table, and get them to work together to make it happen. So these are the questions you have to ask yourself. What are your marketing goals exactly? How do you want consumers to experience your assets? What do your creative users need? And what's the combination of technologies that's going to get you there? So I think when you create a damn technology cocktail, you need to think of a few things that are extremely important. The technology itself, of course, but how do you want your brand to appear and where do you want it to appear? How do I design an experience that's truly immersive and goes across all media, that's truly multi-channel? How do I make sure I have the metadata to support it? And then finally, ensure that the technology you have is designed to fit that purpose. So here's an example from Net-a-Porter.com. If you're not familiar with them, they're a luxury brand, online retailer. If you want to buy a beautiful Versace purse, although perhaps in Beverly Hills this isn't the best place to say you should buy it online because you could probably buy it if you walk out the door, but they do luxury online retailing. And they do a really fantastic job, especially in London, which is where one of their offices are based, of just getting their brand out there. If you order, they'll actually deliver it to you that day in the van. So when it pulls up to your house, you're getting this awesome brand experience where you can buy something online and they will deliver it to your home or hotel in London if you buy it that day in their own brand. So think about, where do I want my brand to be and how do I make that happen? I think immersive transmedia experiences are also really important to think about. When I say transmedia, I mean not just multi-channel, but thinking about how do I absorb or communicate content across different media, not just necessarily consistently, but also in a way that is appropriate for that media. This is actually a pillar in a museum. And this is from the new Middle Eastern art wing at the Louvre in Paris. And this is an amazing pillar because it is actually a transmedia experience where you walk up to it, you can read a poem in multiple languages, you can listen to it in Farsi, English, French, and several other languages that I'm not remembering off the top of my head. But this is all in this glass pillar. And maybe you don't necessarily work in museums, but it's an example just of how you can take something that's very simple and turn it into a multi-sensory experience. This is a kiosk, a trash recycling bin. We're probably not necessarily thinking about trash recycling bins when we're thinking about our digital assets and how we might use them. But this is a trash recycling bin in London. And of course, there was some news about the Duchess that day that was on the recycling bin. But on any given day, there's advertisements circling through there. There are statuses of what is happening on the tube. There's different pieces of information. And I've seen how different companies are using digital assets on these kiosks as you walk through London. It's incredible because you just can't miss them. It's kind of impossible to miss them. So thinking about how can I use everyday things and new technologies that are emerging, especially in very dense environments like cities, in really effective ways. This is a picture I took in Hong Kong, walking in one of the tunnels between two of these connected buildings. And this was fascinating because I am not necessarily someone who really cares about fashion shows, but I was totally captivated by this because as I walked through this tunnel, I was watching different scenes from the catwalk of this Giorgio Armani fashion show. So there were screens as you walked all the way down through that tunnel. And if you've been to Hong Kong, you know it's basically a giant brand assault. You can't escape. You just can't escape brands anywhere, and it's so, it makes New York look retro, right? Because there's just so much media everywhere and so many screens everywhere. And that's an amazing way to actually make me feel like I'm walking down the catwalk with these models. It was really impressive how I walked through and got through all that. Giant pavilions. This is something else that when we think about taking digital assets and not just using them in the we're talking about them on tablets or talking about them on websites, thinking about them in tangible environments too. This was a giant dove pavilion at the Aussie Open in Melbourne, the tennis tournament. And people were lined up just for hours to walk in there and get free antiperspirant and free soap. But it was pretty impressive because the brand was just all over the event, and it really got people excited. Another thing to think about as you use brand assets and thinking about the whereness and howness of your brand is how do you incent people to engage further? So as soon as you get the opportunity to have people in front of your brand, how do you actually get them to spend the money, right? There's that moment of truth. A lot of companies talk about it as a first moment of truth. Okay, I recognize the brand. The second moment of truth is I'm buying it. And the third moment is I want to re-engage with it. And I might go out of my way to re-engage with it. And here's an example of that. So you have dining coupons, where this was on the subway in Hong Kong. I love examples from Hong Kong because there's just so many interesting ones, where you could actually scan a QR code and go into a restaurant and get a discount. It's an interesting way to use brand assets. So think about incentives. And you need to make sure you have good metadata. This was a picture a friend of mine posted recently to Facebook. He lives in Dubai, and he titled it, "Where the Hell's My Car?" Because it's a valet stand at he went to the Formula One races. He's really into car racing. And so he went to the Formula One races, and you could see the metadata there was a little bit complicated and a little bit disorganized. And sometimes I think valet parking is one of the most obvious examples of metadata, right? You're getting a number for your car, and hopefully your car disappears. Someone takes your car away, and you hope you're going to get it back, right? And that's just one simple piece of metadata. And yet, it can still look that messy. It can still be that much of a disaster, and you've got multiple people sort of digging through these things. Where is that car we're looking for? You need to make sure your metadata is really, really in order. And there's a lot of great sessions at this conference about metadata. So if your metadata is not in order, make sure that you are attending those sessions and working with people who can really make it work for you. And then finally, make sure that the technology you have is designed and engineered and fit for the purpose. And this goes back to choosing the right ingredients for your cocktail. One of the things that I pride myself on in terms of what our company does and what Real Story Group does is we stop people from buying the wrong thing. Because it happens all the time. People buy a technology because the sales guy's good at what he does, right? It's very, very common. You need to make sure you're actually using technology for what it's designed to do, okay? This is an example of very, very specific technology. This is walking down a street in Paris where this truck is specifically designed to move someone off the top floor of a building because they don't have elevators generally in these old apartment buildings. And so this structure specifically goes up, you put stuff on it, and it takes things all the way down. So you don't have to get all your friends to carry things up and down the stairs. Very specific technology. Make sure that the technology you're buying and that you're using, you're not trying to put a square peg in a round hole. You're not trying to use a workflow tool to do media distribution, for example. Vice versa, whatever it might be. Make sure you have the right tool. DAM's boundaries are stretching. And so when you are in the market for a digital asset management system, you might also be in the market for something that does workflow. You might also be in the market for something that does media distribution, video streaming, production, all kinds of different things that, frankly, DAM has not traditionally necessarily done well. So you might already have a DAM and think, OK, I might stretch it further. But that's not necessarily the best approach. You might have already spent a lot of money on something and think that it's best to just stick with that and do as much with it as you can. It's not necessarily the best approach. There's a lot of overlap today in technology as well. So one of the panelists was saying earlier, and I couldn't agree more, that it's really common where technologies don't necessarily realize their full potential and realize their full value. And we see that a lot as well. It's very common. And sometimes that's because you buy many technologies that overlap with functionality. And then you can't necessarily get everyone to commit to which one should be used for what. This is an example of some overlap that we see a lot in the industry between marketing automation technology. So these are things that do email automation, where you're sending out email to your customers. Maybe you're using images and digital assets. And then you think, well, our assets are in there, aren't they? But maybe they should be in the digital asset management system. I'm not quite sure what I should use to do that. There's not necessarily a right answer. The important thing is that you decide what the system of record is. Okay? So there are tools that do both marketing automation and digital asset management. But they don't tend to do both really, really well. They tend to do one or the other well. So understanding what the strengths are and weaknesses are of the different tools will help you be more successful. It's not easy to pick. This is one view of the market. Because we're analysts, we like to put things in boxes and categorize them and help people understand what these vendors do in different areas. So this is one way of looking at the market. And I won't go into too much detail here because we could talk about this slide for a very long time. But it's meant to communicate the fact that you have a lot of options. And a lot of the solution providers that are here will talk to you about how they address the different areas within these boxes. But note that most of them are strong in one area and not all of them. Think about the brand engagement cocktail. Think about your particular cocktail. And these are often all the pieces that are involved in that. Different technologies coming together, different functionality coming together, different information and assets coming together, not just about your assets, but also about your customers, your consumers, your employees, et cetera. I have an example of a cocktail before I close off. Here's a technology cocktail. And I do, as many of you know, Real Story Group is strictly a buyer-side analyst firm. So we're very objective about who we choose to present and what vendors we choose to present. So every year I present something from a different vendor to not show any partiality. This year I chose an example from Media Beacon. And this is a very interesting example of a digital asset management cocktail. So this is using their digital asset management solution and is pulling in data from a whole bunch of different places. This is pulling in GPS data from the images and mixing it up with, or I should say mashing it up if you'd like, with Google Earth. So it's saying, here's the GPS location, and take me to that spot where this asset is from, essentially. It's also showing a mashup with a sort of an ontology sorter here. So it's taking the metadata and it's doing different metadata clusters and allowing you to browse through the topics within the interface. That's pretty nifty. And then there is one more, which is linking into social media. So a little social media and digital asset cocktail, and allowing you to share assets on a social media platform. So this is just one example. You could pretty much do this with most DAMs. It's not necessarily unique, but it gives you an idea of how do we pull in information, how do we pull in data from lots of different sources and give people a unified user experience so that they can experience assets in different ways. So I hope I've given you some interesting things to think about. Since we're in LA, I thought I would end with a short tribute to perhaps the most famous cocktail orderer in the movies.
One medium dry vodka martini, mixed like you said, sir, and not stirred.
Thank you.
Anything else, sir?
No, that's all.
Dry martini, lemon peel, shaken, not stirred.
Vodka?
Of course.
Should I have said vodka martini center?
Shaken, not stirred.
The lady will have a Bacardi on the rocks.
For the gentleman,
Vodka martini, shaken, not stirred.
Vodka martini, shaken, not stirred.
Dry martini.
Oui, monsieur.
Wait. 3 measures of Gordon's, 1 of vodka, half a measure of quinoa lily. Shake it over ice and then add a thin slice of lemon.
So I have to say, until the most recent Bond movies, Sean Connery was always my favorite. But that moment is what won me over to Daniel Craig. Right there, because he was so precise about his drink, and that really made it for me. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and if you have any questions about your own technology cocktail and how you might mix it together, I am looking forward to talking to you about that over the next couple days. I am giving one more session today on the marketplace, so if you are specifically interested in very minute details about the market and technology, please join me later. Thank you very much.